Hello there, Drew Hannish of Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting. Today I had planned on doing a tasting of a different whiskey, but with the announcement that Macallan has now come out with a 60th anniversary set of whiskeys, 6 whiskeys celebrating the 6 decades of James Bond, I decided it was time to unveil the real whiskey of James Bond. One of many. James Bond was definitely an equal opportunity drinker. Yes, he drinks martinis in a lot of the movies. We know him for Shaken Not Stirred. But in the books, it was not about Shaken Not Stirred. It was about bourbon. And it was mainly about bourbon because James Bond's drinking habits tended to follow the drinking habits of his author and creator, Ian Fleming, who was told that he was drinking too much gin, it wasn't good for him, and that he should switch to a healthier drink like bourbon. Go figure. So, anyway, that man loved to smoke and he loved to drink, and it shows up a lot in his James Bond books. So when we go back to that era, I mean, if we think about the movies, we really don't see bourbon very often. There's a couple of times that he drinks it. Probably the most noticeable is in Goldfinger, because the end of that movie basically takes place at Fort Knox in Kentucky. And so he orders a bourbon and branch while he is there. He has a mint julep while he's there. So jumped into all of that. And what's interesting is that Scotch, even though James Bond is Scottish, he's really not seen drinking Scotch whiskey in the movies up until we get into the Pierce Brosnan era. And then all of a sudden we see him drinking Talisker. And so Talisker was really the first whiskey that popped in. Then in the Daniel Craig era, they got an agreement going with Macallan, and all of a sudden Macallan started showing up in the movies. But there's nothing to suggest that Ian Fleming ever drank Macallan or was interested in Macallan, because it doesn't really show up in his earlier books. Now, that said, when he was writing those books, single malt was still not something that was popular. And so most people were drinking blends. So if it was going to be a Scotch, he would be drinking, Haig Pinch Bottle was one that he liked to drink. So he would have gone Johnny Walker, that direction, and not in the direction of martinis so much. In fact, I think probably the second most popular drink for him would have been champagne, and he drank a lot of champagne as well. But when you go through the books, you will find that one bourbon seems to stand out. Shows up in 2 different books. He drinks it multiple times in one of the books. The book Diamonds Are Forever. And then in Live and Let Die, he drinks it as well. And that is Old Grandad. So, Old Grandad, now this would have been when, he would have been writing about that when Old Grandad was still owned by National Distillers, who Jim Beam acquired in 1987. So, this would have been produced back when it was, it's hard to say, I really need to dig a little bit deeper into the history of Old Grandad. Basil Hayden is the person who is supposed to be pictured there and who is the reference of Old Grandad. And I talk about it in a previous video, a little bit about that history of Basil Hayden and how he became associated with this particular whiskey. But just interesting to me, the Macallan's coming out with the series. It's going to cost $800 retail. You can only buy it through their website. As far as I know, it may be in travel retail as well. But a big celebration of James Bond, when James Bond really was not a Macallan drinker until Daniel Craig came along. So let's taste the whiskey that Ian Fleming put into some of the books. And by the way, if you haven't read the Ian Fleming books, they can be a little rough. I mean, modern sensibilities and all. We're talking a different era, and so you're gonna see some things there that probably are less accepted by society these days. But thus is, history, and I always say it's a great way to see how we've advanced as a civilization. So, all right. So this is one of those whiskeys that has a lot of bourbon notes to this. This is a value whiskey to me. This 114. I think I paid $28 for this, and it's 114 proof, 57% alcohol by volume. Now, he wasn't drinking this. He was probably drinking 100 proof or something in that range back then. Gives you a lot on the nose. I haven't added any water to this right now, but it is bourbon in your face. You're getting brown sugar. You're getting a little caramel. You're getting some of those oak notes, and you're getting the rye notes and kind of an herbally rye coming through on this. And I'm not really having to strain to pull any of those smells in. Cheers. You don't need a lot on the tongue because it will burn. There is, that's what I call the Jim Beam Funk. It has a little yeasty note, kind of an interesting note that I don't think is that pleasant, but it also comes in with a little bit of, it's definitely a barrel taste. Some of the tannins from the barrel, it's a little off-putting, but it's not overly distracting, but it's probably not my favorite part of this whiskey once it hits your palate. You get the spice, you get some char. The aftertaste on this thing is just char, kind of remains there, and that kind of annoying, it's a mix between an herbal flavoring and a barrel nutty note. And they just kind of marry there together and lay on your tongue. And it honestly becomes a little annoying now. It is annoying me a little bit now. Now in the book, Diamonds Are Forever, they actually end up making old fashions. He orders old fashions made with old granddad. So, go for it. I would say great way to go with this as a sipper. It's a little strong. I'm not going to say it's overwhelming. It's a little strong. Probably good for my sore throat. Put a little water in there and see how it changes it. Doesn't change the nose so much. Ooh, wow. It does add some rye herbaliness. I mean, the herbaliness of the rye really jumped there all of a sudden out in front of everything else. The brown sugar kind of disappeared a little bit. It's still there, but not as strong. Oh, that has evolved. I spoke too soon. It's kind of like when you're giving somebody something to taste and watch their expression. You're trying to elicit an opinion out of them, and you can tell whether it's a BS opinion or just too quick of an opinion by when they stick it in their mouth and they go like this. It's like, it hasn't even hit your tongue yet. How are you already giving me a quality assessment of the flavor of something when it's just barely touched your tongue? Ah, yes. You're going to be paying attention to that from now on, I promise you, because I do. It's like if I want somebody's opinion, I don't want them to, just patronize me and go, oh, that's fantastic. I want your opinion. Give me your opinion. So, yeah, rye standing out a whole lot more now on the nose on this. I think the other thing about this is it doesn't have a very strong mouthfeel. Now, again, you're only paying $28 for a cask. It's not cask strength, but it is a higher proofed whiskey. But the water thinned it a little bit more than it already was. And so, I don't know. This is one I have had this bottle around for a long time. In fact, it was pre-pandemic when I bought this bottle. And you can see how much of a dent that I've put in it. and honestly, most of those are probably when I've been doing tastings with people, and not so much me grabbing the bottle, because there are other value bourbons I probably like better than this one. But a lot of people are really sucked in by that high proof, especially in these days when everybody's kind of gravitating towards high proof whiskeys. And so from that standpoint, it is a value whiskey in that sense. And so it's very approachable financially for those who want to jump into the cask strength world. And it's a clean whiskey. It's not got an aftertaste that I specifically appreciate, but that doesn't mean that you won't like some of those notes, especially if you're more into oaky whiskeys and you don't mind kind of that earthy, herbally rye note coming in there. I just don't think it's a great marriage with the oak in terms of a flavor profile. Those are my thoughts. What do you think? If you had 114 Old Granddad, are you going to go out and spend $800 to get... I'm a huge James Bond fan, but $800 to buy 6 whiskeys from Macallan, when Macallan's not one of my favorite distilleries, man, I wish they would move back to Talisker, because I would love to get a 6... I don't know if I'd spend $800 for it, but I definitely would give it much more of a thought. That is what it is. Leave your comments below. Like if you enjoyed the video, if you learned anything from it, and enjoy some Old Granddad, James Bond's drink of choice from the books. Until next time, cheers and Slainte.